Dr. K, healthy gamer, had a conversation about corn addiction that was extremely helpful. You guys should go watch the beginning of this conversation because he talks about the reason why people get addicted to corn: lack of emotional coping mechanism, lack of healthy ownership of trauma, lack of meaning and purpose. But then he gets deeper into the dynamics between relationships, dating, online dating. And I thought this was extremely valuable. I wanted to share this with you guys. There's a lot of misnomers that he debunks, rightfully so. And then there's some things like maybe a little convicting for some of you guys. All right.
You know, so many things come to mind, but I think we're seeing, particularly in young men, like of sex or frequency of sex is decreasing, and that the even birth rates are decreasing. And so do you think this is sort of part of all of this, like, external stimulation that's around, and then they feel sort of, I mean, this is a theory for me, right? They feel less meaning, right? Because they're not actually having success in finding someone or meeting someone, or it's just easier to access. And then they're like, you know, they're still not connecting with other people. They're using because they still feel bad. Of course, we talked about the cycle a little bit. Are we seeing people get addiction because they're either having stress in their life? So say they're not coupled with somebody, say they are trying to meet people, but they're having difficulty, because I think the dating world has changed, right? With dating apps and how people communicate and meet each other. It's very different from when you and I were younger. And so I think that is a very different sort of place to navigate. Like, women are looking for a certain kind of man, and if you don't fill that category, you are immediately filtered out, right? So women are dating the top 5-10% of men, are trying to aim for them, and then there's a lot of men who are not having success in meeting women.
Yeah. So
she red pilled?
You sound very red pill, right?
That's crazy.
10% of men date the bottom 80% of women, and that makes the world unfair. Now, he gets very surgical. He does some really good stuff. He debunks some of this, but then he actually leans into some really alarming realities about the dating climate today.
So it sounds like you have a theory that that's at play, and I think that's completely reasonable. So let's just play around with that a little bit. So the first thing is that, you know, this idea that women are dating the top 5 to 10% of men. I assume you're talking about like Tinder statistics.
Yeah, like those. I mean, because that's where you can filter by height and by, you know.
Yeah. So I think that there's a couple of interesting, like,
I did not know that.
That's crazy.
Did you guys know that? Apparently on Tinder, you can go in and filter people by height and weight.
Straight up Chat GPT script for man that's 6'1".
That's crazy.
Like, we already systemized it for the women to where they can just swipe all day long and get a large majority, pick and choose.
Yeah.
And now it's, you can filter by height. I don't even want to see the profiles of the short kings.
Wow. All right.
Once you really look at the data, which I don't know if you have, but I'm sure, you know, anyone who's trained in statistics. So when they say they're dating the top 10% of men, there's this idea that one dude is dating like 9 women, whereas that's not usually what happens. Right. So if you look at something like Tinder, it's like a 7 to 9 men to 1 woman like ratio. So when they say they're dating, it's still oftentimes one dude is dating one guy, or maybe people are kind of at the top, but like there's such a lopsided gender ratio that it's still like closer to 1 to 1 in some ways. It depends on the studies that you look at and stuff like that.
So what he's getting at is that there's way more dudes on Tinder than there are women.
It's just going to be harder.
It's just going to be harder. Statistically, that there's more fish in this pool versus that pool. It's going to be harder for, you know, the dudes trying to find somebody.
I remember touring colleges with my family for my brother. And like one of the things they would say is like the ratio of women to men at the school. And I was like, what an interesting marketing technique to be like, there's 3 women to every man at the school. I was like, is this legal? Are they allowed to say that?
But I mean, it's just like, it just goes to show like it increases your odds.
Yeah.
Right?
That's crazy.
Wow.
So I think that this creates this idea that a lot of men have that like, oh my God, there's like these chads at the top that are like banging lots of girls.
Yeah.
I don't think the reality is quite like that when you really look at the statistics. So that's one piece. But I think another thing to really consider that I think you kind of...
So that's huge. That debunks the entire notion that the Giga Chad is just smashing and swimming through all the women on Tinder.
He's just
right
owning the world.
Yeah, that's that. So props to him for debunking that. Now he goes on to say some pretty compelling things. Go ahead.
Hit the nail on the head is that it is harder for men and women to find a good match.
Yeah.
Yes.
There are many reasons for that. I think one reason is that, so if we look at like what women want in partners, and this is generalizations, so you can look at statistics, right? So like the idea of dating a dude who lives at home at the age of 28 is like, I don't want someone who's living with their parents. But 50% of people under the age of 30 who are adults still live with their parents, men and women both.
Yeah.
So the economic situation is changing. So the idea of like an independent man at 28 just doesn't apply to 50% of the population.
That's crazy.
Wow.
Good or bad? I mean, it's not good, but is it bad?
Well, I mean, how do I say this? If we know that 50% of men under the age of 30 are living at home, and you're like, yo, I want this kind of woman, and you know that's the variable. So then if you can reverse engineer and say, well, you know what? If I don't live at home, I'm instantly in a top 50 percentile.
Whoa, that's a great way of looking at it.
Right?
Yeah.
Like if we're looking at it, we're like, hey, because of inflation, because of the economic tension, because of all these things, men and women under the age of 30 are more likely to live at home, and women don't want a dude that lives at home, even though they're okay with living at home. Okay.
Yeah.
So the economy is bad. All these things are true. So the question becomes, well, how then do you become the outlier and tip the scale in your favor?
Yeah.
So my question would be, if you had a loved one and their life depended on you figuring out how to earn enough to live on your own, could you figure it out?
Yes, 100%. Regardless of the economy.
Regardless of the economy.
Yeah.
Honest question. If you had a loved one and their survival hinged on you figuring out how to earn enough money so that you did not have to live at home, could you figure that out? So then, because the question comes down to, and yes, you have to become the outlier. You have to become the anomaly. You have to become like the opposite of what everyone is doing. And I think generally speaking, if you're of able body and sound mind, you could hypothetically figure it out. So let me give you guys a really practical example. When I was younger, I lived with my mom, 22, 23.
Yeah.
Right. I understood that the objective for me, I already had a girlfriend, was to minimize my expenses,
Yeah.
not work a job that was driving me into the ground, so that I could make future investments into the career I wanted to have as a creative entrepreneur. That was the North Star for me.
Yeah.
In my early 20s. So I was okay with living at home because I had a plan to develop other things. If the objective was, I need to find a mate because it's harder to date and the economy is hard, if that was the objective, then what would I have done different? I probably would have had a way different job than working at a teen center at the YMCA and trying to finish a degree in visual and performing arts with a track and music. I probably would have been out here mowing lawns on the weekend, doing Instacart and working at a restaurant or working at a casino or doing something where there was no lid on my income.
You'd be at a perfume booth in the mall.
I don't think I'd ever be
Hey,
at a perfume booth.
my friend,
No,
you
no,
want
no,
to
no.
try a sample?
No, I definitely wouldn't do that. But I would have figured out how to earn more money. Now, the question is, me figuring out earning more money, would that have given me the creative capacity to learn the skills that I needed to learn to be doing what I'm doing now? There's the rub in that.
Boom.
Right? But, I mean, it is a very reasonable thing to say if you know that most women want a dude that doesn't live at home, what do you have to earn to not be a dude that lives at home?
Yeah.
What jobs offer that? Can you go and figure that out at the expense of potentially not doing your dream or not having the easy job so you can pursue your rap career on the side? I was pursuing a rap career on the side.
Yeah.
Right? So anyway, let's go back to this clip.
Another good example of this is most women, I want to say like statistics are historically somewhere around 70 to 80% of women will want to date a man who makes more money than they do. But 60% of college graduates are now women.
Yeah.
So what we're starting to see is as equality of income increases, that
That means men have 4 years advantage to be in the workplace to make more than women.
I mean, yeah, and you can get to making way better money earlier with less education and less training without going and getting a 4-year degree.
Boom.
So while she's out finishing college, racking up her student loan debt for eventually becoming a stay-at-home mom.
Yo, she watches, yo. She watches the stream.
I'm not talking about anyone in particular. I'm talking how many women
I'm
here,
joking.
how many women here
Oh, no.
have
that's-
done that?
That is a common
That's
scenario.
very common.
Because-
Almost every single one of my buddies, when I was getting married, almost every single one of their wives racked up student loan, and some of them in the 6 figures, only to then turn around and be stay-at-home moms.
No, yeah. I mean, that's when nature calls.
And so men get an advantage to be in the marketplace faster,
Yep.
right?
expectation becomes harder and harder to fill. So whatever the reason is, and there are all kinds of challenges that women have as well. They get tons of dick pics and all kinds of other things.
Yeah.
So now that's just on the gender side, but there's a whole other set of things that's like screwing up dudes too, which is that, you know, as men, like we have very poor emotional regulation skills. We're not really taught how to express emotions beyond anger. We're unlikely, it's like hard for us to engage in psychotherapy, which I don't think is a weakness of men. I think there's some systemic biases in psychotherapy that are against men. So if you look at studies on couples counseling, like you ask men, why don't you want to go to couples counseling? And what happens is they feel outgunned. So anytime they go see a couples counselor, their female partner, assuming a heteronormative relationship, knows how to articulate their feelings, and the man doesn't know how to do that.
Yeah.
So the wife is like articulating like, he does this and this makes me feel this way, and the therapist kind of like gets on their side, and so men sort of feel like outmatched, and I think that there's a good reason for that.
The overcorrection to this is telling men to be too vulnerable with the wrong people. I'm not saying that the only way to be manly is to provide. I'm saying the natural biological wiring when you have little kids is for those little kids to be with their mother. Yeah. Generally speaking, there are exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking. And then as the kids get older, especially boys, you want them kids with their dad. You want the boys to be with their dad as like the age of 10, 11, puberty comes around.
Boys have sudden surges of testosterone from ages 3 to 5 as they're going. So it's like almost a pre-puberty. Same levels of testosterone that they see in puberty.
Yeah.
So that, like, remember there's that Mark Driscoll clip talking about being present and taking over the warrior spirit of your 5-year-old or 3-year-old, and people thinking that's dramatic, but in reality, it's super young.
Right. Yeah, that's good. That's a great point, and that's why boys need to physically play and fight and test limits with their fathers.
Yeah,
you know. Go ahead.
There's a lot of this dating stuff going on. There's a lot of expectations that are changing. And then there's a lot of like distortions. So if you look at, I recently saw a paper on incels where their beliefs about what women want are quite divorced from reality. So there are these ideas that, oh, like, you know, the top 10% of dudes are dating all the women. So they assume that, okay, like what that means, right? We can sort of like apply the transitive property is that this woman I'm talking to is only interested in a dude who's in the top 10%. But if you actually ask women, like, who are you interested in and who do you date? It's much more wide and accepting than most men are like understand.
He's totally spot on. If your worldview of the world is that women bad, women like Giga Chad, I'm not Giga Chad, therefore women hate me. If that's your outlook of the world, well, then why would you do any of the things that actually tip the scales in your favor to make you a more eligible dude? You just blame women, and then you get into this weird hypergamous dual mating strategies nonsense that's in the red pill, and it actually hurts your beliefs. Actually harm you. Your beliefs about women actually harm the thing that you desperately want, which is you want to be in a relationship with a woman.
Yeah, and then you attract the women that those things are true. You know, like the red pill guys.
Yeah.
They're like, no, all women are like this. It's like, bro, those are the women that you believe are like that.
Yes.
Also believe themselves are like that.
Yes, exactly.
Crazy.
I don't disagree with you, but I want to kind of push back a little bit because you said it's not cute to date someone who's living at home, whatever, right? You're like, that's sort of a turnoff. And so that's half the male population who's living at home with their parents, right? And then you want people who make more than you, and women are more often graduating college, getting higher degrees, getting higher positions. And the average salary of a man is $45,000 in the US. So it sort of seems like there are, I mean, maybe they're not dating the top 10% of men only, maybe they're just not dating, right? You know, I think that's part of it too.
So I'm curious, how is that a pushback?
No. So my point is like, so meaning that there is the large majority of men are not finding matches. Is exactly what you said. They're not finding matches because women are choosing not to date because their expectations are not being met, which is sort of what you said. But it is, I mean, so they're not wrong in the sense that this woman wants something different than what I have to offer. But they're wrong in saying they only want the 10% of men. Yeah. They just want something different than what I can offer.
Yeah. So I think that there's like both can be true. So I think the challenge now is that like, see, we used to need partners. So now what's happened is our society has become so independent that a man is not even competing against another man. A man has to add value to a woman's life more so than the stress or annoyance that he brings. And that's true for both genders.
Yeah.
So like this is what's going on is like now it's just easier for me to live by myself than it ever used to be. And so now really what both genders are competing against is like, is this other person's life better alone or with me? There's also other interesting statistics. Like if we look at like men under the age of 30 and stuff like that. So if you look at like, there's also an age gap issue. So if you look at women who are 28 and you compare them to like men who are 28, that's kind of a mismatch. But if you look at like, I forget what the statistics are, but there's like a interesting statistic about people under the age of 30 and like, I think maybe like 50 to 70%, I'm rusty on the statistic, of men are not dating or aren't partnered under the age of 30, but that number is lower for women. And the reason for that is because they're dating older men.
Yeah.
So it's very common. So that skews the statistics in some way too.
So the younger generation is having less sex. They're less often dating. They're less often then having children. And that leads to the possibility of our difficulty in perpetuating our population, having a aging population that's not replaceable.
Okay. I think it's important to remember that globally, this is a trend in some places, right? So basically developed nations are seeing this way more. So I remember talking to a colleague of mine in China, China. And so basically, like, you know, China had this one-child policy for a while. And I heard recently that they have this new policy where they will
They're subsidizing. They're subsidizing your third and fourth kid now in China.
Really?
Yeah.
So like if you have a third and fourth kid, they're like, boom, here's some paychecks. That's crazy.
Because they need to get their birth rate up.
They went straight pro-life on them.
Yeah. They need to get, I mean, they went from like awful. I mean, that one child documentary.
Egyptian vibes.
Yeah, seriously. It was dark. They flipped from that to full on like have as many kids as we can because we're really struggling. You know? Go ahead.
Crazy.
So what's going on in parts of China, in South Korea, in Japan, less so in the US, is exactly what you're describing, which is that for every, I think we're having like the lowest birth rate is like 0.67. So they're not even having 1-to-1.
Yeah.
So this is a very scary from an aging population. But there are other parts of the world, like if you look at like South America or areas of like the Middle East or Africa, where people are having still lots of kids.
Lots of kids.
And so I don't think the species is going to die out. I think what's going to happen is like in developed nations, they're going to have this huge problem of like not having enough young people to support the old people.
Yeah.
So that I agree with. Was there? Sorry, I forgot your.
No,
question.
I think that's the issue. And so, like, my question is, like, what can we, like, this is an issue, right? This is a more societal issue than an individual issue, but it's a problem. And so, what do you think? Like, are there things that you think that we should be addressing?
Yeah. So I think that I don't focus on societal issues. I know it's kind of weird. So despite the fact that we have this like large scale approach, I still at my heart am a clinician. So when I work with men who are struggling to date or working with women who are struggling to date, what I always focus on is the individual. And so I think what we really need to do, like what I would love to do is like make a school for crappy boyfriends. I don't know if I could do that for crappy girlfriends because I don't know what it's like to be a crappy girlfriend. Like, but I think that there's a lot of like skills training that we're seeing.
Yes.
So like what should we intervene in? I think social skills atrophy is huge. So what's happening when we start to use technology is like, as you know, any part of your brain that you don't use like rusts. So if you don't speak a language, you'll forget it because your brain is like, hey, we don't need this. So as we move to like text-based communication, what started to happen is our empathic circuits have started to atrophy. So we're seeing a rise of social anxiety. And why is that?
Hold on. As we moved to text-based communications, the parts of our brain that help with human connection, your emotional intelligence or your empathy, which I think that word gets weaponized, but those aspects have atrophied. So what does that mean? That means that we got a generation of socially awkward people, but to his point, specifically dudes. So we could talk about changing laws and no-fault divorce law, bad, and why do women get custody of the kids, bad, and why would you ever sign a contract? Yeah, but on an individual level, there's a bunch of stuff men could do to tip the scales in their favor.
You nerd.
Right?
You're using acronyms in real life. LOL.
And so he's saying, like, we have to have resources to train dudes to just be more competent dudes. And then as you become a more competent, emotionally engaged, present person, the world opens up to you. All of a sudden, people, you could start, you actually become a candidate that people want to be around. You become attractive. You become more pleasant to be around. All these things make you a more eligible spouse.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy.
When I sit with you, I see body language, I see facial expression, I interpret it. And so this part of my brain works well. But now the more that we text, then when we meet in person, I'm going to feel incredibly anxious. So we're seeing a rise in social anxiety in both genders. So that's really what I think we need to target is like, how can you be a more emotionally available partner? How can you be like more confident in yourself? We're seeing like low self-esteem problems, a lot of shame, you know, and social skills atrophy. So these are the things that I kind of focus on. And like, how can you, whether you're a man or a woman, we have everyone in our community, like become just a better human being. And then I think as you become a better human being, what we tend to see is that the relationship kind of like comes pretty naturally. But this is not a societal program. I'd love to make it one.
His whole case being, maybe you just got to fix you. Stop worrying about the daggone society.
Well, and so as we talk on this channel, get your butt into a local church. Why? Because when you're in a local church, you're going to be around different kinds of people. You're going to be forced to talk to people. You're going to have to, you should be serving.
Multi-generational.
You should be doing things to step out of your comfort zone. And the command is to be in local church community, is to gather.
Yeah.
That's in the Bible. You should be gathering. I mean, we sat down with a Catholic priest, and in their stream, they full on say, if you miss church without an excuse, you are in, what is a grave sin. Okay, that's in the Catholic. I'm assuming the Eastern Orthodox feel the same way about it. Within Protestant circles, I hate to say it, like bedside Baptist is not good enough. Get your butt up and get into a church, get connected to a church, get connected to God's people, serve God's people, give, be plugged in, and you'll be shocked.
I caught the live stream.
What are you talking about?
That's what.
Oh yeah, I caught the live stream. Yeah. I watched it from the bed. But you'd be shocked how many of these all of a sudden skills that have atrophied start to rise when you're just around different people.
You gotta look people in the eye and talk to them. You gotta welcome them. Hey, welcome to church.
Not to mention, I'm gonna get very pragmatic. Now you got another dating pool.
Now you're meeting women.
Now you meeting women.
Yeah.
And maybe some of them are chameleon, maybe, I don't know, but look, at least they're in church trying.
When I was in 5th grade, my teacher...
This man just started a Macklemore song.
When I was in the 5th grade, my teacher said I was gay. Yo, that's funny. Oh, man. When I was in 5th grade, my teacher, she got engaged.
Yeah.
And then her husband... came through or fiance came through and they're sitting there talking to us like, hey, here's how we met, you meet my husband, whatever. She's like, and they're like, we did meet at church. Like church is not a
cap.
Church is not a dating pool.
Yeah, cap.
Like, you know, and they're like, church is not a singles bar. That's what they said. And I was like, yeah, it's a good point. In 5th grade, as I was gotten older, I was like, yo, church is the best singles bar ever.
Young adults ministry.
Like, what horrible.
You know, how many people do we know that got met their spouse, got married to young adults ministry?
Yeah, you got to go to the Jordan here locally first,
bro.
and then just be like, all right, then you find a church after that.
Especially if you're not a dude of status. Like, we know a bunch of cats that are like, they got, like John Keith, there's a rapper status. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? But like the average dude that don't got status, you get plugged into a young adults ministry, you start serving, set up the hospitality tray, but put the cookies out, you know, wave at a girl.
Boom.
Come on, man.
Serve in some sort of youth ministry.
Something.
You know?
And be a co-leader in the group.
Yeah. She's
female. She's attractive.
You got 7 roommates, and now you're in that top 50%
because you're not living with your parents no more.
With your parents.
Listen, man, we about to start a daggone mastermind to get some of y'all married up in this place.
Oh man!
All right, let's move on. Hey, thank you so much for checking out the video. Comment down below and let me know what you think. And be sure to check out this video that YouTube is recommending just for you. Let me know if they nailed it. All right, I'll see you over there. Peace.